This is the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition. Coming up,
the most favorite restaurant of our most famous son of the city, the most famous Renaissance artist in Germany, the painter Albrecht Dürer.
Here we are in November 1945, and had they known what we know about Albert Speer today, back then, probably his sentence would have been different.
And when you walk into the Church of Our Lady nowadays, you find the Star of David in the ground.
So sit back and enjoy the trip with David Harris and Mark Gordon.
A very warm welcome to you, dear listener, from the historic and modern city of Nuremberg, which in English pronunciation is Nuremberg, in German is Nuremberg. Why did we say ancient and modern and so on? So it's a historic town, gorgeous medieval centre. Obviously, we are going to be considering over the course of this podcast the very difficult history of this city in the run-up to, during and immediately after World War II.
Yes, that will take quite a large part of our travels. We will be visiting various parts, both pre-war, where the rallies were held, and post-war, where the trials were held. But there's more to Nuremberg than that.
Absolutely. So what were your first impressions coming into town? And you did say something interesting just before we turned on the microphone, that it's a very multicultural city.
If you're trying to picture Bavaria, you picture this alpine, clean-skied, clean living,
pastoral,
bucolic state with people in lederhosen and dirndls milking their cows.
With vertiginous mountains in the background.
Ah, yes, we got it right now.
Thank you, Kibi.
But it's a modern, urban German city. It's multicultural. There are a lot of young people around.
Mm-hmm. Architecturally, as we came in, we came around what looked like the walls of an old town, and our hotel is directly opposite a stunningly facaded central train station.
And one of the things about Nuremberg, like Munich, is it has an excellent transport system, both an underground and an overground, multiple buses.
Gorgeous trams through trees. It was very beautifully appointed. Interestingly, the way we came in was the uniformity of the housing, clearly all post-war housing. It was difficult to tell if it was sort of 1980s, 1990s, or if it was just older buildings post-war built in the 50s and 60s that had just had their facades changed.
I'll tell you how much I like the trams at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning because our hotel is opposite the tram stop.
So that's what's to come, but we've got one thing missing from the introduction.
Could it be a question?
It could be.
Your turn, David.
I very rarely do them. Okay, this one I actually came across myself. Which famous canonical composer was born and had his early education in Nuremberg?
The answer at the end of the pod.
Hi, this is David Harris from the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com.
Well, and my name is Claudia. I'm the tour guide here, and I will guide you through the old city of Nuremberg. So I will be with you today, not tomorrow. So you have the chance to ask me everything you like today. We start walking right away. Most part of the old town is pedestrian area, so we need to walk. We have one of the largest and most compact pedestrian areas in all Germany. And I will guide you from the south to the north, and then you come back here again. Because here we are at the south end of the old town, and we walk up to the castle on the other side. But don't worry, it's walkable and it's not too far. And you were sitting in the bus earlier, so you're full of energy, so you need some exercise today. Okay, so let's start walking.
Outside of Buenos Aires, where would you recommend visiting?
Tell us why you've got a passion for Jewish history as an author.
Is there something unique here that you won't see anywhere else in Georgia or even the world?
Why on earth would you take this incredible boat and launch it in Israel, of all places?
Has David Hasselhoff been to the David Hasselhoff Museum?
You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition with Mark Gordon and David Harris. We've pulled Claudia aside. She is a truly inspirational guide with thorough knowledge of 800 years of history and intense knowledge of sausages. While we've got you now, do you want to talk about sausages or history?
Well, I don't know. Sausages, of course. Food is always the most interesting part of a tour anyway.
So we've stopped right inside the city walls. We've not gone more than about 5 meters, and you're already dishing out sausages. Why?
Because this is what we love to eat here, and we thought you are hungry after you're traveling, and hungry people can get very, very angry, and we want to put you in a good mood. And it's our fast food. Nuremberg citizens, when they walk into the city, they grab 3 on a bun, and this is what we love to eat.
This old bar here, the Bratwurst, I'm trying to read it, Bratwurst
Glöcklein.
Bratwurst Glocklein. Bratwurst is obviously a sausage. What does the rest of it mean, and why is it important to Nuremberg?
It was called Brat Sausage Little Bell because originally this place was located next to a chapel. And whenever the sausage had been ready, they were ringing the bell to announce, oh, it's sausage time, so you can eat it. And this place, actually, it said it was the most favorite restaurant of our most famous son of the city, the most famous Renaissance artist in Germany, the painter Albrecht Dürer. And it said he loved to go there and eat it, which is not proof, though, but it was located next to his house, so most likely he had been there once or twice.
One more question before you go back to the group, because you're not just guiding us. Give us in 60 seconds a potted history of Nuremberg, I guess up to the Second World War.
First dimension was in 1050, and from the very, very beginning it was a center of trade, craftsmanship, culture and politics. And until 1806 it was an imperial city in the big empire, the Holy Roman Empire of German nations. And that collapsed in 1806. And so they lost their status of being an independent city. And in the beginning, the situation here was very, very bad, but they were so smart and inventive that the first train which had ever departed in Germany took off from here. And that was the start of industrialization. Nuremberg became the center of industrialization in the 19th century in the south of Germany. And then in the 20th century, Nuremberg had become a center again. During the black chapter of the German history, during the Nazi period, it became a propaganda city. So here the big parades, the so-called Nazi party rallies had taken place.
More on that later in the podcast.
David, come and get a vegan sausage.
I'm on my way.
One thing to note about Nuremberg, and we are standing in the reconstructed old city. We're not in the Alps anymore. We're at the other end of Bavaria. And it almost doesn't like to be Bavaria here. They're Franconians.
Yeah, we're right at the northern end of Bavaria. Actually, I think we're going further north on our travels, but we're fairly north. It's a 2.5 hour journey north of Munich. And as Mark indicated there, this area is reconstructed. 95% of the historic Old Town was bombed right at the end of the Second World War in January 1945, much later than many other places in Germany that were bombed, say, in the 1942-43. And in a 1 hour period, pretty much all of the town was destroyed. So what we're looking at today, with the exception of one of the towers and gates, is reconstructed and a couple of timber houses. But where we are now is a little craft village inside the walls with restaurants and little stores, and the locals have to promise that it's not just a tourist trap, but they are actually producing their materials in workshops within the city limits.
The chairs here are quite funky. They're tartan, and embroidered on the back are some pictures of foxes with monocles.
We've opened a fine rosé from the Pays d'Oc region of southeastern France.
To stand in front of the Birth of Venus by Botticelli and just take it in.
Turning their backs on these magnificent architectural wonders, and all they want to do is have that Instagram moment.
I listened to the guide for 2 minutes while I was on Wikipedia.
You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition with Mark Gordon and David Harris.
And these fancy spices don't grow here in Nuremberg or anywhere else in Germany. They had been imported from the Far East via Venice. Spices in Venice were expensive already. When they had come here, they had doubled or even tripled the price, which of course made the city unbelievably rich. And they had a very high quality standard, not just with spices, on any product here, which was made here in Nuremberg. So before the spices had been so were allowed to be sold, they had to be controlled first to meet the quality standards here in the city. And they were so good in it, when the seal or the coat of arms of Nuremberg was on the spice bag, people knew this is first class quality, it can't get any better. And that also Nuremberg was very famous for. So spices, then nuts and almonds, that's what we need to make gingerbread. And then, of course, in the old times, sweetened with honey. And surrounding Nuremberg, there's a big forest, this imperial forest, which also had been known the imperial bee garden. When you have a lot of bees, you have a lot of honey. And also the honey had to be controlled first before they were allowed to sell it. And originally it was something people were eating during Lent. You were allowed to eat as much spice cookie as you wanted to, together with beer and wine. Nice diet. And then also it became a snack for the rich because of the spice. It was unbelievably expensive. And then also it became a medicine. The spice cookie are good against everything. They're good against headache, tummy ache, back pain, help you to concentrate. So my advice is have one piece of spice cookie every day. You will survive everything. So forget the apple a day. Apple a day, that's old fashioned.
That was Claudia, our guide, telling us all about lebkuchen, which are spiced cookies. We are in a shop called Dornauer's, which is this wonderful confectioner on the main drag through the old town of Nuremberg. And we've got a treat here, David.
Well, clearly, not only are sausages on the map for journalists running through this town, but we have here the chocolate spice cookie. These are made with at least 40% almond. In this case, she's guessing that they're made with hazelnut in addition. She said a lot of the places that create this throughout Nuremberg are a little bit cagey in telling you exactly what the ingredients are. And one of the people from the tourism organisation was saying she makes them without flour at all. So let's give it a go. Is that a piece of paper underneath?
You always ask me questions when I'm eating cookies, David. That's really nice and soft, and it's not like hard like a cookie, it's quite moist. Yes, that is paper underneath, and it is supposed to be there. Do you want to know why?
I'm guessing it's rice paper, so there should be at least something healthy in this very, very sugary dish.
It's kind of rice paper, but it's not exactly. The recipe comes from monks. It's an old recipe that was created in a monastery. And because it was like a sticky dough, the monks didn't want to get the ovens dirty with the dough. So they took communion wafers and put them underneath the cookies so that they didn't stick.
Okay, we are on the main market square, and originally this place was the Jewish quarter of the city. It has never ever been a ghetto, it was just a Jewish quarter. And Nuremberg started to grow from the castle. We had two independent settlements and in between the Jewish quarter. And in the 14th century, they had built the first city wall made out of stone surrounding the two settlements. And all of a sudden, this was the heart of the city. And in the 14th century, the Jewish population were actually under the protection of the emperor. And in that time, it was Emperor Charles IV coming from Prague. And he wanted to support the city, so he allowed the Nuremberg citizens to burn down the Jewish quarter together with the synagogue. And on this foundation, the main market square had been built, together with the beautiful fountain and the Church of Our Lady.
Is there anything left that people can see of those days?
Yes, because and it was typical that they had built a Church of Our Lady on that, and when you walk into the Church of Our Lady nowadays, you find the Star of David in the ground. The ambry is in form of a sorrow, and you can also even find the stature of the Holy Edith there, just to remind everybody there used to be a synagogue here. Our most famous son of the city, the most famous Renaissance artist in Germany, the painter Albrecht Dürer. He was born here in Nuremberg in 1471 next to the main market square. His family came from Hungary and his father was a goldsmith. And so, of course, he wanted his son to become a goldsmith as well. But when he was 12 years old, he did this self-portrait with a silver pencil. So he really was scratching it into the paper, so he was not able to change it, to erase it anymore. And this self-portrait had convinced his father that he said, wow, this boy is so good. He can be more than just a goldsmith. So he allowed him to become an artist. Albrecht Dürer was a genius. He was not good in drawing and painting only. He was interested into everything what was available in that time. He was interested into stars, into the nature, into the human body, and even into fortification. And he did a lot of first things. For example, he had drawn the nature, how it looked like. This around 1500, this was not common. People were drawing motifs of church and noble people, but not the nature. He loved to travel. He very, very often went to the Netherlands and to Italy. So he took the Renaissance from Italy to here, and he also had changed the perspectives in the paintings. These are his parents. And look at all the details, all the wrinkles. Today we try to erase them because we don't like to have wrinkles in our face and everywhere. But in that time it was something completely new. People were proud to be drawn like this. And he was the son of his time. He grew up next to the castle, which was the best neighborhood in town. So he had good neighbors. And his godfather was Anton Koberger. He was the owner of one of the largest printing workshops in that time. The headquarters was here in Nuremberg, but he had subsidiaries all around in Germany of that time. So he very early got in touch with the printing technique, woodcut and so on. He didn't invent it, but he had improved it so much that his wife was able to go down to the main market square to sell his prints. But he also had been a very good businessman, because think of it, most of the Renaissance artists, they died poor. They were not able to afford a house this big. Well, he had hired 2 salesmen to travel around the country to sell his prints. And one day they got back and said, well, good news, we are sold out. Bad news, people start to copy your work. Yes, and so he started to sign his work, his famous initials, the famous AD. And you might think, oh, what is this, anything special? But in that time, artists didn't really sign their work. He was really the first one doing it. He was signing every single piece of art. That's why people in marketing nowadays call him the inventor of logo, branding, and corporate identity.
That was our wonderful guide, Claudia again. Dave and I are standing at a square at the edge of the old city, a busy, busy square with bars all around and old-looking wooden houses, including the one that Albrecht Dürer lived in. Bavaria Fact File. Munich Airport is the main airport for the region and a main hub for Lufthansa, with flights from 11 US cities, Canada, the UK, and most cities around the world. Lufthansa also fly from Tel Aviv to Munich, as do El Al and Arkia. Bavaria has other international airports, including Nuremberg, with flights from most major European cities. Nuremberg has S-commuter trains, an U-Bahn, tramway and buses. In Nuremberg there is the Sheraton Carlton Hotel and Le Meridian Grand. Bavaria has a mild continental climate with 4 distinct seasons, including warm sunny summers and cold snowy winters. Temperatures typically range from around 3 degrees Celsius 37 Fahrenheit in January to 25 degrees Celsius 78 Fahrenheit in July. The region experiences distinct seasonal changes with comfortable to warm conditions from May to September and cold snowy weather from November to March. Typical Bavarian food includes hearty favourites such as roast pork, pork knuckle and sausages and dumplings. A traditional rural Bavarian delight is a meat and cheese platter known as a Brotzeit-Platter, featuring a variety of savoury German meats like Leberkäse and Bratwurst. Local cheeses such as Oberster or Bergkäse, crusty bread, pickles, radishes and condiments like mustard. For vegetarian there is Käsespätzle, noodles soaked in cheese topped with roasted onions, and lebkuchen, a grated potato patty deep fried in oil similar to a latke. In Munich there is the Einstein Kosher restaurant and look out for the Israeli Levantine restaurant Schmock.
Those were some of the historic voices from November of 1945 from the Nuremberg war crimes trials. Let's hear now from City Museum researcher and former curator of the Palace of Justice where the trials took place, Rebecca Weiss.
When the Allied first came here in 1945, they changed this courtroom dramatically. And the most significant change is that they tore out this entire back wall and enlarged this place. It almost went back as far as to the staircase that you came up before. So it was indeed much bigger, and that is due to one of the two most important purposes of the Nuremberg trials here. The first one was, of course, to punish those individuals responsible of the crimes committed during the Second World War. But the second was to educate the world, the German people and the rest of the world, what happened during this war. And for that, you obviously needed reporters, journalists. And therefore, they massively increased the back seating area here, and they even added a gallery up there where you can see the windows behind you. So basically there was a 2-story seating area here in the back, and they also needed this seating area there in the top for high-ranking individuals who came here, because you have to keep in mind this trial was founded on an alliance, on a treaty, so that it could happen here. And it came from democratic states, mostly. For example, the United States needed this media coverage to prove what they're doing here, because they were investing so much money and they needed to show their people what are they doing with it here in Germany. When the Allied gave back this entire building to the German judiciary, they rebuilt this courtroom back to its original state. And this tells you quite a lot. They obviously did that due to practical reasons, because they didn't need such a large courtroom back then. But it also tells you something about the evolvement of culture of remembrance in Germany. And for a very long time, German society struggled with that. And this courtroom actually is a very good example of this, because it was immediately turned back. And already in the 60s, there were requests from journalists coming here and saying, oh, we want to see the site of the Nuremberg trials. And they got answers like, there's nothing left to see here, please don't come. So you can see that dealing with this past is something that is entirely different today than it was during the 60s. And the Memoriam Nuremberg trials, where you're here today, is actually also a very good example of that, because it only opened in 2010. So a mere 15 years ago, this permanent exhibition was opened here, and this is very interesting when you think about the Memoriam Nuremberg trials, because here there were visitors before there was an actual museum. So there were people here asking to see this place, and the institution basically only came much later. And this is because I think the Nuremberg trials are a very important and significant historical event that we should talk about. And the Nuremberg trials, in the plural, I don't know if you've noticed me saying that, it consists of more than one trial. The first trial, the trial against the major war criminals, is one of the most significant trials in history, and probably the one you all know, where Hermann Göring and the others were sitting right over there. This is, by the way, still the location where defendants were sitting until 2020, because this courtroom used to be an active courtroom until 2020, and this is where always the defendants were sitting. And this is something to do with this door that you can see over there. This door basically leads down to holding cells, because right behind this building is a prison. So you could conveniently bring the defendants back then and until 2020 into this courtroom without having too much of a security risk. By the way, one of the reasons why Nuremberg was chosen for the Nuremberg trials, because of the remaining infrastructure that you still had here. They actually took the trial very seriously. All of them pleaded non-guilty in the first instance of the trial, but you can see how they all had very different strategies in this trial with their defendants. By the way, the defense is a very interesting aspect of the trial. They were all Germans, and you could choose your defense lawyer no matter what he did before. So you could even choose a high-ranking Nazi to defend you in here. That was no problem, because they held this right to a free defense in very high esteem, because they wanted to have a fair court here. And I think a good example for your strategy is Albert Speer. He pleaded not guilty in the beginning as well, amongst all the others, but he was the only one who showed something like remorse in this courtroom. And this obviously helped him in this trial. It also helped him that a lot of his crimes that he was involved in was not yet known, because here we are in November 1945, so only a few months after the war ended. And had they known what we know about Albert Speer today, back then, probably his sentence would have been different. But his strategy and this fact helped him to only get 20 years in prison, and then he got free in the 60s. I think they took it very seriously, and there were also always time for consultations. They brought in the defense witnesses, and I mean, for example, Göring is also one to know who was very prepared for whenever he was called into the witness stand. I don't think they had resignation or something and didn't take it seriously or didn't want to participate because they had obviously no choice, but I think they took it very seriously.
How does the city deal with this today, and how does the population deal with this today?
Today, as you might know, Nuremberg changed, or wants to change, its image from site of the rally grounds and the Nazis' favorite city, so to speak, and of the trials, and then today it brands itself as the city of human rights. And of course, this house here and the documentation center at the former Nazi Party rally grounds are important pillars of this image, but they also have several monuments in this city. They present the Human Rights Awards every 2 years. They have, as our neighbors right next door, the International Academy of Nuremberg Principles. So there are a lot of different institutions, a lot of different actions that support this image today. We are certainly one of them.
And the people?
I think we have the same problem here in Nuremberg as we have probably everywhere in the world, that people tend to forget why this history is important to us until today. And with things like this, what you've seen here, the media installation, we try to change that this is not an isolated event of the past, but this has something to do with your imminent future right at this moment. So connect this past with what is important to every one of us today. And I think this also answers the question I had before. We try to use different approaches now in museum work, obviously always working with the historical facts, but new representations like this one to help people make more understanding of the past and connect it better to their own lives.
That was really, really absorbing. You felt transported back in time a little and taken into the courtroom, but then it gave you that greater sense of where that trial sits in modern history.
The mix of both Rebecca's explanations and also we saw a 15-minute audiovisual presentation actually in the courtroom, where screens and sounds show you exactly how the court was set up. The film, and Rebecca, but particularly the film, then explain how Nuremberg became the basis for the International Criminal Court, and Rwanda and Srebrenica and the investigations into other crimes around the world.
As an Israeli, it was at times uncomfortable to watch, because the film ends with the chief prosecutor of the ICC, it ends with the UN, it ends with celebrity lawyer Amal Clooney giving her input. But what it really started to pick up on was Russia and its actions in Ukraine. And as an Israeli, I'm sitting there thinking, is there going to be something about Israel? Because Israel and the International Criminal Court at the moment in 2025 are intertwined, and the story of the International Criminal Court is continuing. And one of the things that was said by the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court was that people are attacking it. So it's very uncomfortable to sit there and go, what's this going to look like in 2 years' time, 3 years' time?
Thank you for saying all of that. Mark and I actually hadn't had a conversation. Normally we chat about what we're going to say ahead of time, and we hadn't discussed that. We both just walked out. All the rest of the group, in fact, all the rest of the group have left the trial hall. So let's go back in there. It's just Mark and me. Mark and I are now standing on our own in the room where almost 80 years ago, many of the leaders of the Nazi regime were held accountable and received their death sentences. And actually the truth is my left hand is shaking and I feel very emotional, and a lot of that is because of what Mark just said and the position of where we as Jewish people and we as Israelis stand in the second millennium.
This is Mark Gordon from the Jerusalem Post Podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod, or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com.
We've now arrived at the Nazi Party Congress Hall, which was the site of the Nazi rallies which ran up until 1938. Let's hear a little bit more about it.
Here we are in the new part of the documentation center of the former Nazi Party rally grounds. You're basically here in a whole new area of the museum. It didn't exist before. This whole ground floor was newly developed, especially for us, within the redevelopment project here at the documentation center. So we're not only redoing our permanent exhibition at the moment, but we're also redoing parts of the infrastructure. And here, this part where you're right now, this is open to the public. So this is the entrance where our visitors come through. It's a new entrance. Also what's new, and we just have a quick look around the corner, is our new cafe. He is a boy from Nuremberg. He was born in 1919 and he was murdered by the Nazis in their euthanasia program. And because people with and without disability worked here together, they chose him, and this biography, which will also be in our new permanent exhibition, by the way, they chose this biography and chose to name their cafe after him to remember him as well.
That was Rebecca explaining that a new cafe opening at the documentation centre called Cafe Arthur is named after a young man who was killed because of his disabilities.
When you look here and when you look up, you can see that there is also a very different architecture in here. And this is by Günther Domenik. This is basically the first architecture that was built in here when the documentation center first opened in 2001. And he won an architectural competition, which basically had the context to drive a stake, which you can see here, right through the building. It goes from the front to the back of this northern head building of the Congress Hall and basically shows something like an anti-architecture or an opposing architecture to what Nazis built, so against monumentalism. Also, when you look up there, you think, why is this also weirdly shaped and why does nothing fit together? He tried to avoid 90 degrees edges at all costs because the Nazis were all about symmetry and monumentalism and all these things, and he wanted his architecture to be fundamentally different to what the Nazis built here, and to make also with the material very obvious what was built in here by him and what was the original building construction.
David and I have just been standing on a ledge out in a massive open space at the back of this documentation centre. You can look right down through the ledge, and David and I particularly love heights, but we were standing in what is like an old Roman arena or a Colosseum, and it was just gigantic. Apparently, it wasn't even completed in terms of how high it should have gone, but it was as big as a massive soccer stadium or a football stadium.
It looks almost as big as the Colosseum in Rome. It could house 50,000 people. The idea was that it was going to host a massive rally all the way around. There are deliberately half-finished concrete arches from where the giant Nazi banners would be held. There was a specific podium built for where Adolf Hitler was to speak. In the end, it wasn't completed and the Nazis did not gather here, but it is a reminder when you see the enormity of that particular Colosseum of how many people would assemble in Nuremberg to hear Hitler speak.
And as part of the redevelopment of the site, there is a great big concrete block in the middle, which is going to house the Nuremberg State Theatre.
display down there, you can see bits of broken pieces. It's a broken vase. And this vase is very, very special, and also why it's broken is very, very special. It comes from the family of Eva Rössner, and this vase was destroyed during the pogrom night of 1938 here in Nuremberg. It's also known, fittingly, the night of broken glass in quotation marks. This is what many people who speak English know it. And this vase was destroyed when SA men invaded the home of the family and destroyed it. And the family kept this vase throughout the wartime, and then gifted us to us. So it's a really emotional piece that they carried throughout the past and then gifted it to this museum. And I think one of the most important objects to show you how these family histories can also be represented in our museum today. And I think it's very important for us as the documentation center to always show the different sides of what was going on. So in 1938, when there was the rally planned here in Nuremberg happening, and it was the largest rally so far, and at the same time all of the violence escalates basically throughout Germany. And for that, Nuremberg is also a very good representative, a very good example of making sense of this entirety of German history. You can find it here as you can find it everywhere else. And here, in contrast with the rallies, I think it's very important to show always the different sides of it.
Just summarise for us, because there's so much material here, so much information. But the actual rallies, what was it like to be there? Who was there?
To these rallies, people from all over Germany came here in organized events, also then later from abroad, from Austria, for example, after the so-called Anschluss. It was hundreds of thousands of people, basically up to 400,000 people came into the city during the rallies. They were coming here to be either a part of or watch these events that were held here on the rally grounds. And for that specifically, buildings were built where they could have these rallies on the former Nazi Party rally grounds, which consisted of more than 11 square kilometers in its entirety. And they're not only huge monumental architectural buildings, and of which some of them you can still see some remains, but also huge camp areas where people were located, housed, all kinds of infrastructure from streets to train stations. There were special trains coming throughout the country to Nuremberg to transport the people here, so it was very much also a logistical undertaking.
You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition.
We are in the beautiful Italian city of Napoli.
We're in downtown Dubai.
We are at the Mountain Dew Synagogue in Baku.
We are in the magnificent city Krakow.
The Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition brings you the joys of travel and tourism. So why not subscribe today wherever you get your podcasts?
Oh, the end of another one.
Check.
Wow.
That was a different one.
Of our podcasts in Bavaria, I think that was the one that got my emotions moving the most.
It's funny, we were talking about the different places where we stood, including the place where the rallies took place. We were looking at the podium, the most famous podium, the most famous bits of video that you will have seen or read about. And we were saying that the impact that had on you and me as Jewish people, as Israelis, was actually less than being in the courtroom where the trials took place in 45, 46.
We were in 3 locations. We were in the Congress Hall, which was built for the really large rallies but never completed. We were at the Zeppelin Field, where the last remaining podium that Hitler used was there. And we were in the Nuremberg courtroom, where the Nuremberg trials took place. The Congress Hall, I felt nothing, mainly because it was never used. It had historic importance, and it was going to be a symbol of the Third Reich, but it never made it there.
You can imagine the movie. We see the films about Rome where the centurions would march out with the banners to horns playing and so on. You can imagine it when you see it,
Yeah.
But like you said, it didn't happen. And actually, parts of that area have already been turned into a cultural centre, and as you said, a theatre is in the process of being built in the middle of the wide open space at the centre of this Colosseum-esque area.
I think the most difficult thing, and you'd think in some ways it would be the most redeeming place, was the courtroom, because that has a modern context. And with everything that's happening in Israel today,
and in many, many countries around the world right now, where issues of freedom, of democracy, freedom of speech are being challenged, it brings it into sharp focus.
The video we watched was made in November,
the fall of 2022, just after the start of the war in Ukraine.
If that video had been made 2 months ago, what would it have said? It asks questions, which is good. It doesn't take away from the trip in any way in Nuremberg. I think it made me want to come back to Nuremberg because as a city it was fascinating and beautiful, but it also was thought-provoking.
And I think we should end on a high, on a very positive note, and go back to the first part of this podcast. It is truly beautiful. We were wandering around in summer, beautiful weather, just right for shorts and a t-shirt. There were so many people enjoying themselves, laughing and joking, but also taking in the incredible heritage and history of this city. And not all of it is about the Jewish people. There are phenomenally interesting things that took place here, and it's not all about the church and the Reformation. It's just somewhere that needs to be visited.
If not only for the beer and the art.
Absolutely. Actually, should we do the quiz question now, just because it's relevant to what we've been talking about?
Go ahead. This one was yours.
Oh, it was mine, was it? Which famous canonical composer was born and baptized and educated in Nuremberg?
Let me go through my databank of canonical composers. No.
All right, here we go. I'm going to try this, and Mark is going to absolutely groan, but... La 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 la, etc.
If you could see me now and the way I'm staring at David.
And the funny thing is, we're at the back of a bus with about 13, 14 other reporters, and they all suddenly reached for their headphones at that point.
I think one threw himself out the window.
The answer, I actually have no idea how to pronounce his name. The answer is Johann Pachelbel, or Pachelbel, or Pachelbel. If you do know, please let us know. And the way to do that is...
You can contact us on our social media at MarkDavidPod. You can email us at markdavidpod@gmail.com. Any other way?
Snail mail.
Yep. You can send a pigeon or a bat with a message around its leg.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast, particularly thought-provoking one. Let us know through our contacts if you want to hear more of this type of podcast, or you want us to talk about sun, sea, mountains.
And beer.
Oh yes, follow us, share, tell all your friends about it, because that helps us with this algorithm thing.
Before we go, a few thank yous for all the people that brought us here today and helped organise this jolly trip. To Ralph, to Ines, to Off-Air from the German National Tourist Board, to Yvonne, the CEO of the Nuremberg Tourist Board, and to Martina and Laura, also from the Nuremberg Tourist Office, who put up with us for the last 24 hours.
They made us very, very welcome. And talking of welcome, you'll be very welcome to join us in 2 weeks' time for the next episode of the Jerusalem Post podcast, Travel Edition.
And I think that's it. Time to say Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.
Adios.
Shalom.